Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Edric Show. I am your host, Edric Jerome. This is the place for intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and you'll get notified when I post content to my channel. My guest today is Nicole Lynn Lewis. She is the founder and CEO of Generation Hope. Nicole has written extensively about her journey as a former teen mother who graduated with high honors from the College of William and Mary. She has dedicated her career to dismantling poverty through educational advocacy, and she is a leading voice in the national movement for student parent success. She's here today to discuss her new book, Student Parent: The Fight for Families, the Cost of Poverty, and the Power of College. Nicole has received international recognition for her work, and she is the recipient of a CNN Hero Award and a Rossley S. Jaffe Award. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
My pleasure. Let's get right into it. In your first book, Pregnant Girl, which I referenced in the opening, you wrote extensively about your deeply personal journey. But what was the motivation or the inspiration to pivot from memoir to the systematic deep dive that you do in Student Parent? And also, how did your own history with these systematic barriers shape your research?
Absolutely. I loved writing Pregnant Girl and being able to really tell my story and explore my journey. And even in Pregnant Girl, I put my story in the context of larger policy issues, larger historical frames. And that was really an amazing journey for me to write the book and understand how my story fit into all of those things. And I think there was an appetite both from readers, from myself, from people around going deeper into those issues, going deeper into the how did we get here, and why are things the way they are, and what are the solutions. I think that's kind of a logical next step after reading Pregnant Girl, is wanting to dive a bit deeper. And I wanted to create an experience for readers that did that invited people to go deeper into the issues that kind of surfaced in my memoir, and to understand them at a deeper level. And that's what I do in Student Parent, is really help people to break down those significant barriers that parents face and families in poverty face. And it was really great to do that. My story and my experience, again, I think it was another invitation for me to understand how my journey as a teen mom in college was shaped by all of these larger systemic issues, and to really be able to do that in a thorough way. It was such an amazing experience. So I was really excited to be able to do that with this book.
You touch upon systemic issues, and I've had folks on writers before, and we talk about some of the barriers to folks being able to achieve the American dream, and you kind of break it down as well as some of the layers that affect people. The economic system, the educational system, the judicial system, all of these systems that kind of layer on top of each other that can kind of smother people from being able to achieve and to flourish. You write about that and you talk about that in your book, and you've experienced that. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that aspect of what you wrote about and just how stifling that can be to people.
Yeah, I think oftentimes people really see social issues and kind of the plight of so many families who are navigating poverty as being a simple fix. If we could just get them affordable housing, then everything would be fine. If we could just get them more food on the table, then everything would be fine. In addition to a very simplistic view, or a view that's very off, which is if they would just work harder, then they could achieve the American dream. And exactly what you described, there's layer upon layer of challenge and difficulty and barrier for families with few resources. If you pay your rent and you make that bill happen, and you're able to pay that, doesn't mean you have gas in the car to get to work, right? And oftentimes it's a sacrifice. You pay the rent, and that means you can't pay your cell phone bill, or you can't pay for that prescription for your child who's sick. So what I try to do in the book is really help people to understand that there is no simple solution. There is no one thing that we can do, a magic wand that we can wave. It's a puzzle, if you will, that we have to put together of all of these different policy failures across various sectors that we have to address and remedy in order for things to come together in such a way that the American dream is actually possible, for so many families in this country. And a big message in the book is that we have to go deeper than the surface remedies. The backpack drives as students are going back to school are important. The canned food drives are important, but that is not going to create large scale systemic change in this country. And we have to go into the policy solutions to really make a difference.
One of those systemic changes that's needed is just the notion of how people pay for college and how expensive it is. You've called higher education a fundamental right rather than a luxury, because as of right now, it's really a luxury item if you think about it. Um,
Yeah.
how do current tuition structures and financial aid policies specifically penalize, and you write specifically about student parents, which we'll get into in a minute. How does it penalize student parents in a way that maybe traditional students may not experience?
Well, we know the cost of going to college is higher for parenting students. And so, if you just look at the cost of being able to afford to attend college in this country, it's higher for parenting students than it is for students without children and students who may not have parenting responsibilities and all of the other things that we know go along with it. You're looking at childcare costs while you're in class. You're looking at transportation costs. Most colleges and universities do not have undergraduate family housing. So that means that you don't have the option to move on campus. You have to live off campus if you have a child. And living off campus might mean higher rent, right? And larger, higher commuting costs. So we know that college is less affordable if you are a parent and you want to go on and pursue a credential and advance your education. Our tuition structures are not set up for that. They do not accommodate that. They do not recognize that. We have dated structures. We have structures that don't truly acknowledge the parenting status of students, truly do not address the costs that are associated with going to school. And we know that college, like you said, is not affordable across the board, for most families in this country. But for individuals who have higher costs, it's almost out of grasp. And we have to change that. We've got to put things in place to make college more affordable for everyone, but certainly for those students who have higher bills.
You also write about how student parents tend to perform better at college than you would think. Talk to me about that stigma of being a student parent and why it's so important for you to try to shatter that narrative.
They're, they haven't done things in the right order or done things the right way. They're not ambitious. And what we see in the data is the exact opposite. These are highly motivated students. They have higher GPAs on average than non-parenting students. I think so much of it is about motivation. When I think back to when I was in college as a young mother, I was so motivated to get my degree because I knew that was the way I was going to be able to provide for her, the best way for me to be able to provide for her. And so think, well, these are people who may not really care about their education. They're not very motivated. They haven't done things in the right order or done things the right way. They're not ambitious. And what we see in the data is the exact opposite. These are highly motivated students. They have higher GPAs on average than non-parenting students. I think so much of it is about motivation. When I think back to when I was in college as a young mother, I was so motivated to get my degree because I knew that was the way I was going to be able to provide for her, the best way for me to be able to provide for her. And so that is what we see every day with so many parents across the country. You want to provide your child with the very best. And education, getting your education is the truest pathway to that. So they're very motivated and often do better academically, but they're 10 times less likely to get to that graduation stage because of the systemic failures across higher education, across our various systems. So that says a lot about the work that we have to do.
One aspect you wrote about that I found it was like almost like a no-brainer is you advocate for on-campus subsidized childcare. And it's because in childcare in general, whether it's on campus or not, is very expensive, and it is one of those systematic barriers. What would be the impact if childcare was subsidized, if families didn't have to worry about childcare when they're on campus, and it was a way to alleviate some of the economic pressure that they feel already?
Well, there's data that we're seeing coming out of schools that are able to provide childcare supports that shows The students are more likely to graduate when they have those supports in place. So all the data shows that childcare is such a huge factor in making sure that students can actually make it to the graduation stage. We see at Generation Hope in our work every single day the importance of childcare as we're working with teen parents in college in our direct service work, and it's clear, when we create a real possibility of consistent, affordable, quality childcare, and when it's convenient. Oftentimes you might have a childcare solution, but it's 20 more minutes out of the way in your commute. If you're going to school and you can have a centralized place where you can bring your kids to get that quality childcare, it is a huge differentiator for you. And we often encourage colleges, and I talk about this in the book, to think creatively about childcare. Sometimes it is 9 to 5, right? And sometimes when students are more likely to be maybe going to college at night, going to classes at night, it's drop-in care. It's something more flexible that is going to meet students where they are. And it's all about schools really figuring out who their students are, what their needs are, what their childcare needs are, and being able to put supports in place. But childcare makes a huge difference.
Another area you highlight, and it's one of those areas that I think really doesn't get a lot of attention, and I'm glad you highlighted, is food insecurity on college campuses. Most folks don't think of that. They think college life, but talk to me about food insecurity and why that's such a critical aspect of college success.
Well, in recent years, thankfully, there's been so much more attention being focused on hunger at the college level. And again, people often have these misconceptions about who actually is in a college classroom. The vast majority of college going students in this country are commuting, they're working several jobs, they are parenting, all of these different experiences that we don't often think about. We're envisioning students lounging on hammocks and playing volleyball and going to parties. But that's not the reality for the majority of college students in this country. They are working hard, they're juggling so much, they're parenting, many of them experiencing low income, coming from first generation, college family. So it is a real reality that it is hard to put food on the table. We are seeing that across the board with college students, so many that are really struggling to access food while going and pursuing their degree or their credential. But we also most certainly are seeing it with student parents. And it makes sense because this group of students is more likely to be low income. They're more likely to be, working multiple jobs. And also they're feeding, they've got mouths to feed. When I was in college, I remember trying to subsist off of a granola bar, and trying to get through the day just off of that, because I was giving any food that was coming into the house, I was giving it to my daughter. And that's what parents often do, right? You're going to take care of your kids. So food insecurity is even more of a problem for parenting students. And when we think about what is required for us to learn, having enough food to eat and sustenance is key. It's hard to concentrate in class. It's hard to stay awake in class. It's hard to make it to class and get through your studies and write that essay if you don't have enough food to eat. And that's a huge barrier for this population.
Instead of thinking about when you were answering it kind of struck me about the resources available on college campuses. A lot of the major colleges have gigantic athletic budgets. I mean, coaches are being paid tens of millions of dollars a year to coach, to get fired and walk away, and they're still paying all these coaches this millions of dollars. Talk to me about some of the inequality, because it seems like if there was a different focus, the resources on some campuses are there. They may just not be in the right area to help folks who you advocate for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that athletic budgets, new buildings, right? There are a lot of things that are happening on campuses that feel very disconnected from the realities of being a student, and particularly parenting students. And oftentimes when we're talking to college presidents and administrators, we are talking about how do we make these investments. Some of them are significant. If you're going to build a child care center on campus, it is going to be a significant investment. If you're going to set up a different structure for being able to help parenting students meet the financial needs of going to class and pursuing a degree or standing up affordable housing on your campus. Those are significant investments, and that is about how do we reallocate? How do we think differently about where we're putting our funding? We also encourage college administrators and leaders to think about what are those no cost and low cost things that we can also do to really make a difference for parenting students. I was just talking to someone earlier about, you can make sure that you have photos of parenting students in your collateral and your marketing materials, making sure that if I'm a parenting student, I'm walking down the hallway and I see a poster promoting the food pantry, for example, I see a mom, a student with a child on their hip going into the food pantry. So it's sometimes small things like that that also can make a huge difference. But we want people thinking about everything. What is the no cost, the low cost, and what are those significant investments that we do need to make that really, move the needle for this group of students.
Let me pivot now and ask you about your organization, Generation Hope. Tell me about the organization, its mission, how it got started, and how you were able to create this organization and not just create it, but also have impact and be successful.
Yeah, I started Generation Hope in 2010. So we will be 16 years old in March. And really, it came out of my own experience. As I talk about, Impregnant Girl was a teen mom, put myself through college, and graduated after 4 years of dealing with so many of the things that we know student parents have dealt with and are dealing with, housing insecurity, food insecurity, really navigating a higher education system that wasn't designed for me as a mom. So many of the hurdles that we know exist. I experienced many of those things, and I graduated with high honors. My daughter walked across the graduation stage with me. She was about a little under 3 months old when I started at William and Mary. And I moved up to the DC area, and I was looking for an organization that was dedicated to teen parents in college and making sure that teen parents had everything that they needed and deserved to be able to complete college. And none existed in the DC region, very few across the country. And I thought, maybe I'm the person, who's supposed to start this and supposed to make sure this organization exists in the world. And it really was about a gap. There are many organizations doing wonderful things, but this organization is so needed because there aren't enough people doing this work and making sure that parents, particularly young parents, have access to those resources that make college a reality for them. And so launched the organization in 2010. We have really two sides of the house. One side of our house is the direct service work, where we are boots on the ground with about 200 teen moms and dads across 5 sites, 5 states, or 4 states in the District of Columbia, really making sure that they have those wraparound holistic supports to help them get to the graduation stage. We not only work with them, we work with their little ones through an early childhood program. We have career readiness programming, mentoring, all of those things. And it's been incredible to do that work, to see the difference that those types of supports make in the lives of young families. And we've taken that and really used that learning to inform the other side of our house, which is our systems change work. And so we really learn from our families, and we take that into policy spaces and policy conversations to talk about what legislation really is needed at the state and federal level to ensure that families have what they need to access economic mobility and education. And then we also work with colleges and universities through our technical assistance program, which is called Family U. And that work is all about helping them transform their campuses to be more family inclusive. So many of the things that we've been talking about and that I talk about in student parent, we really do through our Family U work, rolling up our sleeves with college leaders and policymakers to help to drive systemic change.
Your work has been, as I mentioned in the opening, you've been recognized as a CNN hero, which, CNN is an international CNN Hero Awards. That's international recognition, and it's very prestigious. So when you found out, how did you feel when you found out you were going to be recognized? And how did you feel when you were actually receiving the honors for the work that you've been doing?
Oh, I mean, I think it was 2014, so maybe 3 or 4 years after we had started Generation Hope. It was overwhelming. I mean, Generation Hope started very small with an idea and very much like no seed funding. No one was knocking at my door and saying, "Hey, I love your idea. Here's $100,000 to get it started." I mean, it was like brick by brick building the organization from the ground up. And there were a lot of people who said, it's not a good time to start a nonprofit, or that's a great idea, but people aren't going to want to invest in this population. I had a lot of naysayers. And so to early on have that validation and that celebration of our work was huge for me as a social entrepreneur, and just to an encouragement, to keep going. And when I think about where we were as an organization in 2014 and where we are as an organization in 2026, I mean, we have grown by leaps and bounds. And I think those early validations of our work were so critical to, keep going, to making sure that we kept going and kept pushing forward.
When you are a social justice advocate and you are out there fighting the good fight every day, you spend a lot of time pouring into others. How do you recharge and how do you refuel your own emotional tank so that you can stay strong and continue the fight?
That's a great question. In addition to being an author and an entrepreneur, I'm also a mom of five, and so those moments are hard to find. But I think it's intentionality. I try to be very intentional about my self care. Sometimes you have to write it into your calendar. I mean, that's really been important for me, is like carving out the time. If you don't really do that, especially when you have a jam-packed calendar and you have so many things happening, it's easy for your self-care to get pushed down, further and further on the list of priorities. And so putting it on my calendar is really important. I love taking walks. I mean, simple things like feeling the sun on my skin,
Yes,
is
yes.
important for me. I get a lot of joy out of my kids and just spending time with my family. So I think it's about like, what are the things, really thinking about what are the things that bring me joy, fill my tank, and then holding that time sacred is critical and important. I talk at the end of the book about, for example, the importance of sisterhood. And particularly as I was writing this book and in this season of my life, so many women have been critical in just lifting me up and holding me and, having space for me. And so that's a great example. Like, I try to really make sure I'm connecting with my girlfriends and holding that time sacred. So I think that's critical and important.
Well, again, congratulations on the book. What do you want people to take away from this book? And how are you going to help this make sure that what you've done, the research you've done, can actually affect change and change policies around the country?
Yeah. I hope people read Student Parent and have several aha moments. I hope it really helps people think differently about the issues, whether it's housing or it's food insecurity, and then also about what's possible for families in poverty. There are so many limitations put on people who are navigating scarcity, and I'm really hopeful that this book encourages people to do something, to think about things differently, do something to activate change, and to really show up for families in a different way. There are so many ways that I'm hoping this book actually translates into change. I hope it reaches, folks working in education, even folks at the higher high school level, thinking about teen parents in their classroom, but also, of course, people working in higher ed, of course, policymakers really ensuring that they are uplifting and advocating for policies that make college possible for parents, that make it easier for parents, and that we aren't just talking about these issues in silos. For example, not talking about childcare just as it relates to work, but also thinking about childcare as it relates to education, right? And so I'm really hoping that the book is helping policymakers also think about what is possible.
Well, Nicole, if people want more information about you or the book or Generation Hope, where can they go?
Yes, please go to generationhope.org. There's a ton of information on there, ways to get involved, volunteering. Of course, we are fundraising all the time to make our work possible. People can follow me. I'm on Instagram at Nicole Lynn Lewis, and would love to connect there. And we are also on Instagram at Support Generation Hope, or Support Gen Hope on Facebook, Support Generation Hope, and on LinkedIn, Generation Hope. So there's lots of different ways to get involved. And the book is on sale everywhere. So anywhere books are sold. And we have ways, if you want to pre-order, we can enter you into a special campaign we're doing for some perks with pre-order through generationhope.org.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Nicole Lynn Lewis, founder and CEO of Generation Hope and author of the new book, Student Parent, The Fight for Families, The Cost of Poverty, and the Power of College. I want to thank you so much for coming on the Edric Show. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for all of the advocacy and the great work you're doing.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
You're very welcome. This has been another edition of the Edric Show. As promised, intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. You'll get notified when I post content on all of my channels. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next episode.